Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup. How is everyone feeling? Today, we are reading chapters 201 to 205, and we are making our way to the halfway point of the volume already. I say this every time, but I can't believe how fast we're making our way through this book. Hi, Psyche. I'm glad you could make it, and you were early, too. Hi, Blue. Hi, Vase. And last time we left off at an interesting moment, and I noticed that the next chapter, and the first chapter of today's reading, is called Passions. So I kind of wonder if we're, done with that moment, or not. Or if we have more to go. Hi, Henry. So, I guess I am gonna get started. This book, if we are continuing things from before, I guess I just don't get to monetize any of my videos. So I actually have the physical book with me this time, so I could tell you page numbers. We are on page 179 for chapter 201. Passions. Shen Zichuan couldn't get up. The insides of his thighs were covered with bite marks, and Xiaoqia had fallen asleep on top of him, pinning him down. Shen Zichuan had still been asleep when Fei Sheng came to call him late in the morning. He couldn't even lift his face. Xiaoqia leaned down and kissed him where he had turned his head to sleep. The kisses so intense, Shen Zichuan could scarcely breathe. "Spare me, please." Shen Zichuan strained to rise, then collapsed back onto the bedding, eyes half closed, and rasped, Mind's in a whirl. Can't think." Xiaoqia's chest pressed against him, a furnace that had him sweating. Red bloomed everywhere across Shen Zichuan's skin. There were the bite marks, and then there were the pinch marks. The back of his neck was the worst off, having borne the brunt of Xiaoqia's assault. Blue, oh no, that's terrible. Whatever will he do? At the most intense point last night, Shen Zichuan had found himself caught in Xiaoqia's lap, with his legs hooked over Xiaoqia's arms, unable to move except to lean back against Xiaoqia's sturdy chest. Amid such overwhelming pleasure, Shen Zichuan forgot all about play-acting their clandestine affair, as he cried out "Ah yeah" and so on until he came. After that, Xiaoqia had pinned him down and continued until Shen Zichuan came again, face pressed to the pillow. He couldn't remember how many rounds they had gone, only that, eventually, his tears had run dry. Toward the end, he was dizzy, but Xiaoqia still wasn't satisfied. He thrust into Shen Zichuan until his soft moans became pleas for mercy. His voice, thinned to nothing but by his cries, inflamed Xiaoqia. It made his heart itch so madly that the only way he could find relief was to bite Shen Zichuan again. Poor thing. Xiaoqia pulled him into his arms and whispered, "I'll hold you up." Who was it who came to get him? Fei Sheng? Whoever it is who came to get him must just be like, oh, brother. Yin Chang had risen early today and come to wait outside on the veranda and seek an audience with the prefectural governor. Fei Sheng saw the old man glancing around, looking uncomfortable in his own skin, and struck up a conversation. "Sir, you met with him yesterday. Why are you still nervous?" Yin Chang tugged at his sleeves. "I feel all wrong. They rubbed me so hard with those bars of soap yesterday. My skin was all wrinkly." "Sir, there's a reason why you needed that." Henry, T97 shot me in the chest and buried me alive. Yeah, me too. Me too every day of this stream. Fei Sheng stifled a laugh. Seven or eight young male servants had been sent to attend Yin Chong yesterday. Together, they'd scrubbed him for a full 4 hours, going through several big tubs of hot water. It wasn't until the middle of the night, after the banquet had ended, that the old man made his escape, holding up the legs of his pants as he scuttled away from the servants. He needed that 4 hours. Bathing is good for you, Fei Sheng said. You look well, more energized. You could pass for my brother today. Don't you fucking lie to me, Yin Chong mumbled. He hadn't had a good night's sleep. You've got a silver tongue, that's for sure. He looked around furtively again. Is Arya inside too? Uh-huh. He rushed back just to meet you. Then can I go to Li Bei? Yin Chong blurted. I'd like to meet General Liu. Fei Sheng was stumped. He didn't know how to reply. Yin Chong's desire to meet Liu Guangbai was no surprise. That deadly formation of his was obviously adapted from the Bianjun Commandery garrison troops. But Li Bei was fighting a war right now, and the area along the Chasha River was unstable. Yin Chong couldn't run around as he pleased. He was still thinking when he heard movement on the other side of the door. Let's see his lordship first, Fei Sheng suggested. See what he says. He's just grumpy because his feet are cold without the grime. Apparently. A window had been cracked to let in some fresh air. It wasn't especially chilly today, but Chen Zichuan was sensitive to cold and wore a coat even indoors. During the journey back, Fei Sheng had taken a look into Hua Lingyun's background. He'd written a report on his findings in their entirety for Shen Zichuan, leaving out no detail. Shen Zichuan hadn't gotten anywhere close to reading it before bed last night, and was looking through it carefully now. The muskets Fei Sheng seized were handed over by Hua Lingyun himself. Shen Zichuan turned the folding fan between his fingers before setting it down. This man is interesting. I'll have to meet him. He and Xiaoqia were both seated on the settee. All that separated them was a low table. Sitting with an elbow propped on its surface, Xiaoqia looked playful, but the expression in his eyes was wicked. Every glance over was an invasion. His eyes swept between the words, male lover, bitten to death, and arson. He's tough, he commented. If Hua Lingyun hadn't thrown a wrench into their plans with the muskets, Yin Chong would have taken Fanzhou during his first essay. Shen Zichuan would never have been forced to give Yin Chong the ultimatum to win or return with his own head on a platter. Yin Chong later successfully provoked the enemy out of the city, stepping onto the battlefield openly this time. But the fire Hua Lingyun had set in Fanzhou had diminished the impact of the battle. Failures and achievements had offset each other, and Yin Chong's reward was once again reduced by half. It was possible Hua Lingyun genuinely wanted to throw in his lot with Shen Zichuan, but had not employed the optimal strategy. He'd fought a battle with firearms to show Shen Zichuan he was useful, more useful than the generals Zizhou currently had. That's what I'm hoping, that he wants to throw in his lot with them. Xiaoqia, not while you read about horrifying crimes. Exactly, Blue. I'm like, listen, another time. They were still reviewing the report when Yao Wenyu entered with Kong Ling pushing his wheelchair. Following them was Yu Xiaozai. The gentleman bowed to Shen Zichuan, who gestured for them to take their seats. It's so cold, Shen Zichuan said to Yao Wenyu. You should have asked Chao Tianya to come drop me a note, and I would have moved the meeting to your courtyard so you didn't have to make the trip. Yao Wenyu hadn't slept well the night before, and his eyes were slightly bloodshot. He had brought his cat along today, and the animal was curled up in his lap. It's just a stone's throw away. There's no need for your lordship to put everyone to such trouble. I saw Elder Yin and Fei Sheng waiting outside. Will you see them now? Yes, Shen Zichuan said. Elder Yin has been waiting for almost an hour. Fei Sheng led Yin Chong in, kneeling to both Shen Zichuan and Xiaoqia. Xiaoqia looked at Yin Chong. Did Elder Yin sleep well last night? This was the first time Yin Chong was formally meeting Xiao Qie. He hadn't gotten a good look yesterday, but now that he was within spitting distance. Holy smokes, he thought. This Arya is much too tall. Xiao Qie's legs as he sat on the settee were almost as long as two Yin Chong's. Yin Chong grew nervous all over again. Wringing the hem of his robe, he mumbled, Not too bad. Elder Yin, please take a seat. Shen Zichuan knew Xiao Qie was an imposing presence, neither approachable nor agreeable. Thus, he softened his own tone. We'll be discussing some military affairs with the gentlemen today. The troops will soon be deployed to Duanzhou, but Fanzhou cannot be left unattended. Kongling was familiar with Dongzhou, so he was the first to speak. Based on Fei Sheng's report, Huo Lingyun is inextricably tied to everything that happened in Fanzhou. He comes from a family of generals. His father was Huo Qing, the commander of the Dongzhou garrison who repelled the bandits in that prefecture in the 6th year of Xiande. Huo Lingyun's feud with Yang Qiu and the rest of Dongzhou's bandits probably begins there. I remember Huo Qing. Yu Shaozai settled in his seat and continued. He submitted a memorial to the Ministry of War that year, essentially a report of victory. However, within the next few years, the prefect of Dongzhou, Peng Fangmiao, impeached him for being headstrong and conceited. He accused him of resorting to arms without due consideration, and thus provoking the bandits in the prefecture to seek revenge on the commoners, which devastated much of Dongzhou. The Ministry of War deliberated quite a while before deciding not to promote him. Shen Zichuan motioned for Fei Sheng to stand, then addressed the gentleman. The local governments are a mixed bag, Shen Zichuan explained. From the time the Pan and Hua factions took control of the court, the impeachments that came from the lower levels were a mess. The majority of them arose from personal grudges. Very few of the cases handled during the reign of Xiande were valid. He was right. Setting aside his own reasons for disliking the Xiande emperor, the factions during his reign were as irreconcilable as fire and ice. Everyone in Chudu distinguished between enemy and ally based on what faction they supported, and the division within the regional governments was even worse. The legitimacy of Huo Qing's impeachment could not be determined based on a few memorials from that time. Whoever Huo Qing was then has little bearing on Huo Lingyun now. Xiao Qie drew a clear distinction between father and son these days. You escorted him back. What did you think of him during the journey? Yin Chong was an honest man with a one-track mind. Fei Sheng didn't let him speak. He could tell from Xiao Qie's tone that the second master did not like Huo Lingyun, and neither did he. Fei Sheng served Shen Zichuan. He would have plenty of opportunities to distinguish himself on the field once they established the light cavalry, but Yin Chong might not get another chance. The old man's hair and beard were white. After all these years, he'd finally been granted this one battle, and now some male consort had appeared out of nowhere and snatched most of the old man's credit out from under him with a few flashy tricks. Though his expression remained neutral, Fei Sheng was displeased. For the sake of revenge, this young man endured great hardships. He did whatever it took to achieve his goal. He's impressive, I'll give him that. But when I arrived at Fanzhou's Yamen, I noticed the coats of King Yi's mastiffs were full and glossy. When I asked around, I learned Huo Lingyun fed King Yi and Cui Qing to the dogs. If he had a grievance against King Yi, why didn't he reach out to us earlier so we could work together? Rather than agree with Fei Sheng, Shen Zichuan paused for a moment in thought. Since everyone is here now, go ahead and summon him. Huo Lingyun had spent the last 2 days in a cell. The wardens who delivered his meals never spoke to him. Fei Sheng had taken special care to give him heavier shackles than usual, but it seemed he did nothing but sit there. The moment Huo Lingyun stepped into the courtyard, Gu Jin could hear something amiss. Flanked by Ding Tao and Li Xiong, he watched from the veranda as Huo Lingyun trudged past. They're heavy. Li Xiong pointed at Huo Lingyun's feet and said to Ding Tao, "That's the set of chains I wore." But he seems to be moving freely. Ding Tao tattled to Gu Jin. Jinge, he's trained in martial arts. He was far from merely trained. Gu Jin lifted a finger, motioning for the guards hidden around the courtyard to be on alert. He patted Ding Tao and Li Xiong's backs to shoo the two young ones aside, then approached the half-lowered hanging screen and caught the eye of Chao Tianya on the other side. Chao Tianya looked appraisingly at Hua Lingyun's back. He's rather formidable, he murmured. Shen Zichuan didn't size Hua Lingyun up immediately, but Hua Lingyun didn't shy away at all from sizing up Shen Zichuan. The prefectural governor was 22 this year. He was undoubtedly beautiful, the corners of his eyes tapering up at the perfect angle. Any higher, and they would give him a seductive come-hither look. As they were expressive, as if they should be swimming with emotion. Yet he seemed extraordinarily cool and detached. His gaze, when he looked over at last, was chilling. He was unfathomable, an abyssal pit that appeared more dangerous the longer one looked at him. Whether it was because Shen Zichuan had been in a position of leadership for a long time, Hua Lingyun didn't know, but he found that Shen Zichuan had an overpowering air when he did not speak. It wasn't the kind of imposing aura that rushed at him head-on, but a bone-chilling frost that crept along his limbs and froze his heart. So this was Shen Zichuan. Xiao Qie nudged his thumb ring. His posture remained unchanged, but the weight of his presence fell upon Hua Lingyun like a kick to the face. Narrowing his eyes, he looked down at Hua Lingyun, his regard so oppressive the young man could barely hold his head up. Shen Zichuan was the precious jade pearl Xiao Qie held between his fangs. Those with prying eyes were asking for death before they ever got within striking distance of Shen Zichuan. Just a look was an affront to Xiao Qie, even if Hua Lingyun was only looking out of curiosity. Although the gentlemen advisors in the room hadn't grasped why, they could sense the second master was displeased. The atmosphere grew heavy, pressing down on their chests until it became difficult to breathe. Your confession statement doesn't tell the whole story. Only now did Shen Zichuan glance at Hua Lingyun. You turned over the firearms, but you didn't explain where they came from. It's vexing when someone only gives half an answer. Hua Lingyun had experience with both men and women, and he thought he understood the look in Xiao Qie's eyes. He flicked his gaze away from Shen Zichuan and shifted. The shackles around his wrists clanged. Naturally, there are some things I can only discuss in front of the prefectural governor, he answered calmly. If what you say displeases me, Shen Zichuan said, his tone cool, then whether you're in front of me or not, it's all the same. When Suzhou advances on Duanzhou in the second month, you will be met with scorpions in addition to the Biansha horsemen. Hua Lingyun looked up at Xiao Qie without a trace of fear. Xiao Fengshu is dead. Does the Li Bei armored cavalry still have what it takes? The pad of Xiao Qie's finger froze on the notch in the thumb ring. He finally moved. Deliberately, he leaned forward, his aura enveloping Hua Lingyun. Across the ground crept the shadow of a wolf with one eye. Fei Sheng, who had been standing off to the side, swiftly dropped to one knee and lowered his head. Beside him, Yin Chong felt a prickle of fear run down his back. Heart-thumping, the old man almost slid all the way to the ground as he knelt after Fei Sheng. A deafening silence descended, within and without the room. Xiao Qie was angry. That's the end of the chapter. Yes, Blue, agreed. Don't you love it when power couples power couple? I feel like it's not going to go in this direction, but I really want things to go where they dislike Hua Lingyun at first, but they become allies. But I don't know what angle Hua Lingyun is, like, approaching all this from. So he's a very interesting character to me. I just love how intimidating they both are together. The translate thing is doing it again. Henry, you said Sa'an, and YouTube said, what year? I was like, what do you mean, what year? I don't even know if that's a real translation of anything. Yes, I want Hualing Yun art too. Agreed. So, we are on page 189 for chapter 202, Connecting the Dots. Hualing Yun had seen wolves before. In the wilderness of Dongzhou, wolves that were all skin and bones slunk through King Yi's hunting grounds with their tails between their legs, eyes green with insatiable hunger. But this wolf hailed from Li Bei. Not only did he possess a powerful physique, he exuded an aura so intimidating, Hualing Yun gripped his chains tight, the muscles on his back tensing as he braced himself. He couldn't even gasp for air. He felt certain that, as soon as he opened his mouth, Xiaoqia would snap his neck. Xiaoqia had taken complete command of the atmosphere around him. Though he made no move to touch Hualing Yun, his presence pressed Hualing Yun into the ground. Xiaoqia wanted Hualing Yun on his knees with his head down. In that silence that stretched without end, Hualing Yun broke into a cold sweat. He'd meant to resist, but by the time he returned to his senses, he had already averted his gaze and bowed his head. Since that heavy snowstorm, the Li Bei armored cavalry had had a tough time on the battlefield. They hadn't won a single battle. Gone were the days when the armored cavalry reigned in the north. Hualing Yun had thought to stomp on Xiaoqia's spirit, hoping to level the playing field during negotiations between them. Yet instead he had slammed his foot into an iron plate and been pinned to the ground. Xiaoqia's shadow did not recede. His lowered gaze came to a stop on the back of Hualing Yun's head as he echoed with cold detachment, "Does it still have what it takes?" Deflated, Hualing Yun clenched his jaw and swallowed his indignation. To think this man had made him afraid. Unlike Shen Zichuan, Xiaoqia didn't feign civility. His style was to dominate and dictate. He held down the heads of those who provoked him, and offered them only one way out, his way. The Imperial Army had, in its earlier days, learned from this experience. Shen Zichuan replaced the lid on his teacup and tapped his fingers against it, slowly and without rhythm. He knew how to thaw the atmosphere after a cold spell. This subtle action curiously unraveled the tension in the hall, allowing Fei Sheng, still kneeling, to resume breathing. Outside the door, Gu Jin, too, exhaled lightly and loosened his grip on the hilt of his blade. Only after Hualing Yun's entire back was drenched in sweat did the shadow enveloping him pull back. Xiaoqia's eyes remained fixed on him. He merely leaned back in his chair, as though he'd lost interest in the cowed Hualing Yun. Shen Zichuan lifted the lid of his cup and took a sip of tea. "You're well acquainted with the situation in Duanzhou." These two passed the interrogation seamlessly between them, yet both exuded a dangerous aura. Hualing Yun's palms were clammy. He reevaluated his contempt, certain now that he had been right to come. The scorpions came to King Yi. Hualing Yun had decided to show his hand. During the 12th month last year, one of them tried to convince King Yi to ambush Chazhou and cut off your access to Qidong. To that end, he gifted King Yi a shipment of firearms. Oh. It was a gift from the scorpions to King Yi. In a flash, both Shen Zichuan and Xiaoqia thought of the white scorpions. These Biancha spies concealed themselves deep in the heart of the Zhou Empire, collaborating with Amor from within. The 12th month of last year had been a turning point. It was then that the Li Bei armored cavalry had gone completely on the defense. Had King Yi been gutsy enough to launch a surprise attack on Chazhou as the scorpions wished, Shen Zichuan's attention would undoubtedly have been diverted, and his aid to Li Bei reduced. Ooh, Henry, can we please get the scorpions on our side and infiltrate Gadal? If Shen Zichuan offers to treat them better than Amor does. That would be interesting. I like the idea of that. What was more, if King Yi had truly cut off Qidong's route north through Chazhou, Qi Juyin would have had to take a detour around the eastern side of Tianfei Watchtower and pass through King Yi's territories. If the Scorpions had set an ambush en route, the Grand Marshal's life would have been in danger. They're keeping a close eye on Marshal Qi. Shen Zichuan looked at Xiao Qie, his eyes conveying the words he left unspoken. Ha Sen's ambush of Xiao Fengshu had been intended not only to deal a blow to Li Bei, but also to lure out Qi Juyin. As expected, Amor knew the Zhou Empire like the back of his hand. But King Yi didn't agree. Xiao Qie's words were scathing. He was more than willing to huddle in Fanzhou like a sniveling coward, until you came along and blew his head off with a gun. So then, did the Scorpions come looking for you? Huo Lingyun stared at his knees. No. You are lying. Shen Zichuan skimmed the foam from his tea and raised his eyes. Across that ribbon of steam, he pronounced with certainty, "You've been in contact with the Scorpions." During his time in the Embroidered Uniform Guard, Shen Zichuan had successively served as the southern and northern judge, and spent a good deal of time in the imperial prison. He had his own way of interrogating people, a skill he had put to use first with Ji Lei, then with Shi Hongxuan. And we know how that went. He was adept at using his environment to manipulate the atmosphere of a conversation. Sometimes, the most effective strategy was to say as little as possible and let the listener's imagination run wild. Huo Lingyun knew he had to remain clear-headed. One more wrong answer and the blade would be at his neck. He braced himself and exhaled deeply, as if forcing himself to remain calm. He was already at a dead end. The worst that could happen was happening now. When he lifted his head once again, he had regained some of his composure. "That's right," he said. "I was in contact with the Scorpions long before I met King Yi. In the 6th year of Xiande, my father fought a triumphant battle. He sent his men to persuade my father to give up Fanzhou with the promise of a noble title. But my father turned him down." Shen Zichuan inclined his head slightly. The lingering redness at the corners of his eyes melted into the shadows behind him. "You said he, not they." Huo Lingyun recalled that night several years ago, when the carriage from Chudu brought a letter of incredible significance. Hua Qing had read it by candlelight, running his fingers over the promise within. If the Bianjun Commandery was the most wretched post in Qidong, then Dongzhou was the most dismal prefecture of Zhongbo. These two locales were similarly destitute. Dongzhou's one and only advantage was that it didn't face regular attacks from the Biansha horsemen as the Bianjun Commandery did. After the fall of Zhongbo, the rampant bandits had put Hua Qing in a terrible fix. He'd been stranded in this small corner of the land, unable to get any assistance from the imperial court. That letter had been Hua Qing's last chance to escape his predicament. Yet he hadn't taken it, and had ended up as dinner in the dogs' bellies. Yes, he. Hua Lingyun bit out the word. This man is hiding right in Chudu, and he's no ordinary person if he can make such a promise. After my father refused the bribe, he was impeached by that Peng bastard. The Ministry of War refused to promote him. They believed the lies and cut funding to the Dongzhou garrison. The bandits resurfaced immediately. Yang Qiu went to Fanzhou and joined hands with Cui Qing, and the two rebuilt the brothels, trafficking people from all over. At the same time, he made overtures to Lei Chongming on Mount Luo. The dots were all connecting now. Shen Zichuan had been puzzled when he looked into the Yan clan's accounts in Dunzhou. How had Biansha not left any traces when they stole those weapons and equipment from the garrison armories? Now it was clear. The supplies hadn't traveled through Dunzhou, Mount Law, and Duanzhou at all. From the very beginning, Lei Changming and Lei Jingzhe had merely been a smokescreen Amor set up in the northeast of Zhongbo. No wonder Yan Heru had been so sure of himself. He had indeed never touched any supplies meant for Amor. At the same time, he must have been in the know. The merchants under him all had dealings with Cui Qing. When he added this to what Yu Xiaozai had mentioned regarding Peng Fangmiao's impeachment of Hua Qing during the 6th year of Xiande, Shen Zichuan was even more certain of his theory. Amor's supply lines went through Fanzhou. Shen Zichuan cradled the teacup in his hands. They delivered the goods directly to the banks of the Chasha River, without passing through Duanzhou. This he had dangled a noble title before Hua Qing, hoping to bribe him into becoming a white scorpion. Need to know who this is, like right now. And it's similarly being dangled before us. If their commander turned traitor, the Dongzhou garrison troops would become escorts for the scorpion's deliveries. After Hua Qing refused, this instigator instead sought out the prefect of Dongzhou, Peng Fangmiao, who accepted the bribe and impeached Hua Qing in the harshest terms. Yojing, Shen Zichuan turned to Yu Xiaozai. When was Peng Fangmiao transferred to Dongzhou? What year? Before that, who was his teacher? Yu Xiaozai racked his brain. I can't remember. Zhongbo has been neglected in its administration since the 4th year of Xiande, and the prefects of Duanzhou, Fanzhou, and Dongzhou changed frequently. All I remember is the impeachment memorial. Great Zhou's officialdom was as vast as the sea. There were innumerable positions of varying importance in Chudu alone. The more trivial posts in the regional governments were even more complex. Yu Xiaozai couldn't possibly remember all the various magistrates and vice-magistrates within the 13 cities of Jueshi, let alone the sprawling territory of Zhongbo. Such minute details as the year one particular official was transferred, or the teacher who had recommended them, were lost to time. It had to be known that in Chudu, when someone sent a visitation card and called on a prestigious house, all it took was for the head of the clan to be willing to see them and exchange a few words, and the visitor could proclaim themselves the host's pupil the moment they stepped out of the door. They would be sure to address their host as teacher at every meeting thereafter. On top of that, the Hua and Pan factions had upended all the rules of the court in the years of Xiande, resulting in countless lackeys operating under their names. After a moment of silence, Xiaoqie called, "Ding Tao, get in here." That's right. Ding Tao, doesn't he have, like, basically a photographic memory? And he keeps a notebook, in addition. I don't really know why the person with the photographic memory keeps a notebook, but just in case, I guess. Ding Tao stuck his head in. Alarmed by Xiaoqi's expression, he walked in stiffly, legs and arms moving in tandem. Everyone in the hall paused to look at him. He opened his eyes wide. He wanted to glance at Shen Zichuan, but he didn't quite dare to. Xiaoqie was in no hurry. He shifted in his seat, then asked Ding Tao, "Do you remember the name Peng Fangmiao?" Ding Tao shook his head blankly. Outside, Chao Tianya suddenly had a thought. He piped up, "Taozi, we're looking for someone involved in creating the Ministry of Personnel's short list of officials to be sent out to the provinces after the 4th year of Xiande. Someone who could have recommended this man. Think again. It could be Hua Siqian, Wei Huaigu, or even Pan Rugui." During the 4th year of Xiande, when the Bianxia horsemen slaughtered the city, the only remnants of the Dongzhou garrison had been Tantai Hu and his compatriots, all of whom were absorbed into Xiaoqi's imperial army. The prefect of Dongzhou had died in the massacre as well, so this Peng Fangmiao must have been assigned after the 4th year of Xiande. Ding Tao's penchant for note-taking was well known, but his memory was also astounding. His family's notebooks were modeled after the record-taking practices of the embroidered uniform guard, and Ding Tao had learned the method during the years he tagged along with his father. Back in Chudu, Chao Tianya had once snuck into the Prince of Libei's manor at night, and been stopped by Ding Tao and Gu Jin. With just one glance, Ding Tao had guessed the origin of his steel needles, a feat Chao Tianya still remembered to this day. Ding Tao fished out his little notebook. For a moment, all was silent save for the rustling of pages. Watching him, Yu Xiaozai also began to remember. He blurted, "The Chief Surveillance Bureau." Ding Tao's eyes lit up. He jabbed at a page with his finger. "Chief Surveillance Bureau. That's right. The Chief Surveillance Bureau. Gongzi," Ding Tao said, looking expectantly at Shen Zichuan. "The assassination attempt at the banquet." When the embroidered uniform guard and Chief Surveillance Bureau were investigating Master, there was someone with the surname Fu. That's him. Fu Linye. God, this goes back so far at this point that I'm like, do I remember this man? I don't think so. The name sounds like a name I've heard before, but that's about it. Of course, Shen Zichuan remembered. It was during that case that he had first noticed something amiss with the Chuancheng silk. The man who had shirked his own responsibility and pushed the search of the Prince of Libei's residence onto Shen Zichuan was none other than the right censor-in-chief, Fu Linye. Yu Xiaozai slapped his thigh and stood up. He was so annoyed with himself he had to laugh at the ludicrousness of it. Chortling with Ding Tao, he said, "I remember now, too. Your lordship, before that assassination case, everyone thought old Fu Linye was just an official of humble origins. That's right. Fu Linye was the one who put Arya through all that suffering back then. That dog-bellied son of a bitch. He's slicker in a slop jar, sneaking around with Wei Huaigu in them." The rivalry between the noble clans and those of humble origins had come to a head after the 4th year of Xiande. Back then, Hua Siqian had ruled the Grand Secretariat, with the Empress Dowager and Pan Rugui assisting him. Hai Liangyi had relied solely on the Chief Surveillance Bureau's reviews to keep the minions of the Hua and Pan clans from running amok in the regional governance. Fu Linye, who'd worn an honorable mask back then, had wielded considerable influence with Hai Liangyi and the other officials of humble origins when they were considering the Ministry of Personnel's potential appointees. If Fu Linye was the one who assigned Peng Fang Miao to Dongzhou, Shen Zichuan paused. Then the man who offered the bribe to Hua Qing could be Wei Huaigu or even Shi Hongshuan. He's wetter than what, Henry? He's slicker than a slop jar. That was fun to say. And that is the end of the chapter, by the way. Well, we're narrowing things down. We're figuring stuff out. It would be interesting if it was Shi Hongshuan, because he really was up to the most. Oh, here we go with a chapter title that I believe is somebody's courtesy name. Again, and I don't remember who this is. We're on page 199 for chapter 203, which is called Song Yu. Who is Song Yu? I cannot remember these courtesy names. Huo Lingyun obviously didn't know who this instigator was, or he would have given the man's name the moment he opened his mouth. But whether it was Wei Huaigu or Shi Hongshuan, both were already dead. Yao Wenyu stroked the back of the cat's neck with 2 fingers. In the 6th year of Xiande, no one but the Hua and Pan factions could have made the promise of a noble title to Hua Qing. At that time, Shi Hongshuan had yet to join the imperial court, and Wei Huaigu didn't have that kind of power. Why does your lordship suspect these two? Noble title. Xiaoqie stressed the 2 words. Trace this promise up the chain, and you'll end up with the names Pan or Hua. Making an offer like that would be as good as proclaiming their guilt. If we look at the trajectory of Peng Fangmiao's career after that, explained Kong Ling, the promise of a noble title was likely a ruse. What they actually bribed him with was something else. He broke out in a cold sweat at the thought of the scorpions. Although Qian Jin was the Minister of Revenue up until the 8th year of Xiande in name, Wei Huaigu was the one really in control of the treasury since the 1st year of Xiande. The former Minister of Revenue, Qian Jin, had been dismissed from office along with Huas and Siqian after the attempted coup at the Nanlin hunting grounds. Yet the keys to the Empire's vaults had not fallen into Hai Liangyi's hands. Wei Huaigu had stepped forward and immediately taken over as the Minister of Revenue, where he continued to lead Hai Liangyi around in circles. It wasn't until Wei Huaigu was imprisoned during the case of Li Bei's rotten military provisions that the noble clan's embezzlement of state treasury funds in the Xiande years came to light. This deficit had led directly to the fall of Zhongbo. It was an intricate, complicated web that involved not only officials from Chudu, but those from various regional governments. If this instigator had used the same method to place pawns in Jueshi and Qidong as well, how many white scorpions were there operating throughout the empire? It's enough to make one's blood run cold, Kongling blurted out. They had corroded the empire from within. There's no need for panic. Shen Sichuan looked around at his advisors. His calm tone scattered the heavy anxiety that had gathered in the air. The more they tried to do, the easier it would be to give themselves away. Even the most well-laid schemes are bound by the limitations of the mortal body. These kinds of manipulations are time-consuming and labor-intensive. Involving too many people is counterproductive. As they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. Jueshi and Qidong were not the same as Zhongbo. The chaos and corruption in Zhongbo were the result of lax administration. But Jueshi had Jiang Qingshan, and Qidong had Shi Juyan. Everything Jiang Qingshan had done during his investigation into the treasury's deficit with Xue Xiuzhuo would have handicapped the noble clans and white scorpions working with them. Meanwhile, the Grand Marshal oversaw all territories in Qidong. She had a core team under her command, as well as Qi Shiyu to assist her in the administration of the region. She would never collude with the scorpions. But there was one thing Shen Sichuan was certain of at this moment. Whoever had tampered with Bianjun Commodary's grain was a white scorpion hiding in the capital. This scorpion had not been trying to force Lu Guangbai to rebel, but drive him to his death. Xiaoqia once again looked at Huo Lingyun. The scorpions gave the muskets to King Yi. But who taught you how to use them? Firearms weren't as common as sabers or swords. As a native of Dongzhou, Huo Lingyun would likely never have seen one in his life. He would have had to undergo training if he wished to use them with any proficiency. Xiaoqia had handled muskets before in Chudu and knew this firsthand. At this point, it hardly mattered whether King Yi himself knew how to use them. If the man had known Huo Lingyun could fire a gun, he would never have kept him by his side without taking more precautions. Huo Lingyun pressed his lips into a tight line, his expression solemn. After a moment, he answered, Old Fong the 10th. The muskets had been one of the reasons Fong the 10th was willing to join hands with Huo Lingyun to remove King Yi. Huo Lingyun was a quick study with the weapons and a regular presence at King Yi's side. Not to mention, he could press King Yi for information on the vault and keep an eye on his movements at all times. After you reclaimed Dunzhou, Yang Qiu and Fong the 10th became uneasy. Huo Lingyun continued. Once Zizhou reached an agreement with Li Bei and Qidong, Fanzhou and Dongzhou would be next on the chopping block. They were afraid King Yi couldn't stand up under pressure, that he'd open the gates and surrender. So they decided to make the first move. They planned to off him and empty out the vault. Huo Lingyun had used the vault as bait and lured Yang Qiu and Fong the 10th to their deaths in that fire. The money was now in his hands, and he was the only one who knew where it was. Otherwise, he might not have had the confidence to negotiate with Shen Zichuan and Xiao Qie. Hua Lingyun's gaze shifted between Shen Zichuan and Xiao Qie. I know how to use firearms. I can teach the Libe armored cavalry and the Suzhou garrison troops. Then he looked straight at Xiao Qie and said, when you march on Duanzhou in the 2nd month, put me in the vanguard. I'll lead the remaining Dongzhou garrison troops. Fei Sheng, who had been kneeling off to the side all this time, scowled. He took a moment to compose himself before speaking. Master, it's not my place to interrupt, but this matter concerns the safety of both Duanzhou and Arya. I must offer up a few words of my own. This man is slippery. It's not appropriate to keep him by my lord's sides. Arya doesn't lack generals. And Elder Yin will march with us as well. He was unusually sincere this time. His misgivings toward Hua Lingyun were not unfounded. Yin Chong had taken Fanzhou. If not for this young man's underhanded tricks, Yin Chong wouldn't have been dressed down and robbed of so much of his reward. Yet now that they held Fanzhou, here Hua Lingyun was claiming the lion's share of the credit, as if their victory was only possible because he had set fire to the vault. Hua Lingyun was a man who could endure suffering, and so dared to be ruthless. When he struck, it was with efficiency and decisiveness. His vindictiveness was comparable to Shen Zichuan's. Such a man had both a mind for schemes and the ability to see them through. To allow Hua Lingyun a spot at Shen Zichuan's side was a threat to Fei Sheng, and Fei Sheng had no desire to give Hua Lingyun an opportunity to steal the show. Fei Sheng was clear on how things worked, and he knew where his own opportunities lay. He only dared interrupt now because he was certain Xiao Qie didn't like Hua Lingyun. Sure enough, Xiao Qie hadn't planned on answering Hua Lingyun at all. He needed the muskets, but he didn't need Hua Lingyun. He, Xiao Qie, was the only one allowed to take Duanzhou. He had been in Suzhou for weeks, spending every day at the Beiyuan training grounds. He donned heavy armor to train with He Rigu's scorpions, hoping to find a breakthrough that would turn the tide in Libe. If he put Hua Lingyun in the vanguard instead of his own men, it would be a heavy blow to the Libe armored cavalry, whose morale was already low. I'm wondering how they can use him without giving him power in that regard. Shen Zichuan's back was starting to ache from sitting. The raised bite marks on the inside of his thighs had yet to subside. What he had told Xiao Qie this morning about his mind whirling was not a lie. After these revelations about the white scorpions, the truth seemed obscured by an even heavier fog. To prepare for the troops' march on Duanzhou, they had to start transporting provisions to Duanzhou this afternoon. And now there was the thorny issue of whether Hua Lingyun could be put to use or not. Hua Gongzi has considered things carefully. Yao Wenyu put in to Shen Zichuan. The embroidered uniform guard has been seeking new recruits recently. Have they not, my lord? That's right. Shen Zichuan immediately saw Yao Wenyu's intent. If they placed Hua Lingyun in the embroidered uniform guard, Fei Sheng, who was already suspicious of him, would keep a tight leash on the young man. And with Chao Tianya nearby watching over them both, Fei Sheng couldn't run roughshod over Hua Lingyun either. This move would put distance between Hua Lingyun and Shen Zichuan without letting such a resourceful person go to waste. He really has a plan for everything. That just answered my question. What was more, Chao Tianya and Hua Lingyun would act as a pair of restraints holding Fei Sheng in check. Fei Sheng was gradually distinguishing himself from the flock, but he needed a reminder not to let his success go to his head. Fei Sheng, Shen Zichuan said, take your pick from the remaining Dongzhou garrison troops. We want everyone who meets your recruitment standards, including this young Master Hua. Fei Sheng understood the intent here as well. His heart sank, but he put on a show of gratitude. I shall of course follow Master's arrangements. But these Dongzhou garrison troops are all Hua Lingyun's old acquaintances. They may not be willing to serve in the embroidered uniform guard. Then you must entice them with the right rewards. Xiao Qie turned the ring on his right thumb back to its original position. There was no smile in his eyes. Once they joined the embroidered uniform guard, they will no longer belong to Dongzhou. Their old status in the Dongzhou military can be expunged. Xiao Qie said just enough to make his point. The imperial army he tamed years ago was a more difficult beast than these Dongzhou garrison troops. His method of managing his subordinates had been, from the very beginning, to be fair in meting out rewards and punishments. These leftover soldiers of Dongzhou could make a clean break from their registered place of origin once they joined the embroidered uniform guard. They could even be exempted from field taxes in Suzhou. As long as they acquitted themselves well with the tasks Shen Zichuan handed out, there was nothing they couldn't have. Fei Sheng expressed his agreement at once. Yeah, y'all still don't trust Hualing Yun. Henry, you said, I think they need at least one big misstep where they get double-crossed before they win at everything again. That's fair. I could definitely see Hualing Yun causing some problems. But this is kind of one of those situations where I'm like, are we supposed to believe that he's going to do something bad and actually it's going to be somebody else? I don't know. Generally, I cannot make predictions about this book. There's too many pieces in play. It was late by the time the meeting concluded. Chao Tianya wheeled Yao Wenyu back to his courtyard. The stone slabs of the paths in the courtyard had all been cleared. Not a speck of snow was left on the ground. Is Chao Tianya Song Yu? Or is that somebody else? I'm still thinking about who Song Yu is, because I can't remember. The servants had gone out of the way to sprinkle salt as well, for fear that the wheelchair might slip on the ice. The newly planted plum blossoms had all withered, the fallen red petals dead in the embrace of their branches. Encased in ice and snow, they painted a bleak and desolate scene. I don't like that. The ground was slippery, so Chao Tianya walked slowly, keeping the wheelchair steady as he pushed it along. Yao Wenyu's cat was called Hunu, pet tiger. If she was not stretching herself and licking her paws under the eaves, she would be nestled on Yao Wenyu's lap, sleeping soundly with her belly exposed. At present, she was a little bundle of energy as she kneaded Yao Wenyu's sleeves and nuzzled hard against his palm. He scratched Hunu's chin. The lanterns outside illuminated his profile. He had gained a little weight lately and looked much healthier than when he had first arrived. This was the famed Yao Yuanzhuo of distinguished demeanor and ethereal appearance. Chao Tianya did not speak. His gaze caught on Yao Wenyu's collar, then darted to the cuff of Yao Wenyu's sleeves. They hadn't exchanged a single word today. What is that about? As the wheelchair passed inside, the attendants filed in to deliver hot water. Yao Wenyu sat reading, while Chao Tianya removed his saber and stood outside, staring at his chin. As in, the chin, the instrument. At length, the servants withdrew from the room and closed the door gently behind them. Usually, Chao Tianya personally attended to Yao Wenyu in the bath and accepted no help from others. Yuanzhuo liked to be clean. If he didn't bathe, he couldn't sleep. He would always sit quietly while Chao Tianya dried his hair. He seemed to have accepted the sorry state he was in, but only to the extent that he allowed Chao Tianya to care for him. No one else was permitted to see. This was the limit of what he could bear. Chao Tianya stood outside for close to an hour before he finally heard Yao Wenyu call out hesitantly from within. Chao Song Yue. Okay, is he both Song Yue and Song Yu? I remember that he went by like a different name at one point, and then they were like looking for someone with that name, and then they found him. I guess Song Yu is him. He froze, his fingers hovering over the chin strings, but he didn't respond, as though he hadn't heard. The wind chimes stirred beneath the eaves, ushering in the melody of the lonely breeze. Yao Wenyu could see Qiao Tianya's shadow upon the curtains hanging over the door. He seemed to have been standing there for a very long time. After a moment of silence, Yao Wenyu continued, "It's time for bed." Oh my god, Vase? Is it a ship name? Like Song Yue and Yao Wenyu? Song Yu? Is that it? Oh my god, I didn't even think about that. What is happening? This time, Qiao Tianyao paused, then drew the curtains aside to enter. The light from the candles was dim. Yao Wenyu preferred the lights low at this hour, for it was the time of day when he was most frail and helpless. Hu Nu burrowed into the sheets and swatted playfully at the corner of the blanket, oblivious to the awkwardness in the room. Yao Wenyu had yet to school his expression when Qiao Tianyao bent forward with steady composure and picked him up from the chair. Their clothes whispered against each other, and Qiao Tianyao secured Yao Wenyu's arm around his shoulders. As Yao Wenyu's hand brushed Qiao Tianya's back, his fingers curled slightly. Yuan Zhuo was a reserved man, the result of his upbringing as a gentleman of virtue. Qiao Tianya unfastened the ties in Yao Wenyu's hair. The look in his eyes at this moment was one of pure concentration, so intense Yao Wenyu couldn't bring himself to meet his gaze. He lowered his eyes to avoid Qiao Tianya's searching look. When he had been stripped down to his inner garment, Yao Wenyu muttered softly, "Don't." Qiao Tianya paused without letting go of the belt he was holding. Yao Wenyu's fingers suddenly clenched his collar with an expression somewhere between anger and affront. "I said don't." "Don't what?" Qiao Tianya, who had been silent all this while, looked at him with perfect calm. Yao Wenyu's "don't touch me" caught in his throat. He looked at Qiao Tianya with bloodshot eyes, as though staring down some terrible beast. His hands trembled slightly, yet the word that emerged from his mouth was still, "Don't." He pressed his lips into a tight line and pushed against Qiao Tianya's chest, rejecting his touch. The rattan chair creaked. Green and white flashed in the bronze mirror, as dark hair and wide sleeves flailed in Qiao Tianya's arms like spring leaves anxious to escape in the wind. Qiao Tianya let him make a scene. Just as Yao Wenyu was about to slide to the floor, Qiao Tianya overturned the rattan chair, grabbed Yao Wenyu's wrists, and pinned him down onto the rug. "What do you want?" Qiao Tianya held both of Yao Wenyu's wrists in one hand and gripped his jaw with the other hand, turning his head to face him. "Do you want me to throw you in like this, or leave you here?" Yao Wenyu was forced to tilt his head up under Qiao Tianya's fingers. His breath quickened as he squeezed his eyes shut, biting down on his lip until it went white. Qiao Tianya released his jaw and pressed his fingers between Yao Wenyu's lips to prevent him from drawing blood. Yao Wenyu ground down on them as if venting his anger. "What are you afraid of?" Qiao Tianya let him bite, his expression cool. "Last night wasn't your fault. I knew something happened between them they were feeling awkward about. I knew that's what was going on. Last night, Yuan Zhuo had been very different. Lax with drink, he had forgotten the pain in his legs and gotten hard under Qiao Tianya's touch in the bath. Even a noble young master was still human. He had lost his legs, not everything that made him a man. He was young yet, and though he kept them to himself, he yet had a young man's unspoken desires. But he didn't even have the opportunity to pleasure himself anymore. He was laid bare and exposed to Chao Tianya's eyes every night. Even so, he could never accept how powerless he'd become. "What's wrong?" Chao Tianya asked, voice harsh. "Are you aggrieved because I'm not a woman? I wasn't that bad with my hands, was I?" "Stop it." Yao Wenyu's face betrayed his pain. All he could do was cry dispiritedly as he lay here. "Stop it." The rattan chair had rolled to the side in their tussle. It knocked into a small clothing rack, which fell onto Chao Tianya's back. Chao Tianya didn't even blink. Studying him under the flickering candlelight, Chao Tianya couldn't understand what Yao Wenyu was so angry about either. "How do you view yourself?" Chao Tianya asked. "Do you think of yourself as a banished immortal? Is it wrong to have desires? I don't." Yao Wenyu's eyes had gone thoroughly red. His voice trembled as he strained to speak. I don't need it." How could he sink so low? How could he destroy his last shred of dignity? What would he be left with then? His dignity was all he had to his name, and it was this that sustained him so he could sit up straight before everyone in his frail state, and withstand their pity. As Yao Wenyu trembled, tears slid down his cheeks against his will. Just as his legs were no longer able to support him, his tears, too, were beyond his control. He was ashamed to face the side of himself, ashamed to confront whatever remained of his desires. Chest heaving, Chao Tianya turned Yao Wenyu over. Yao Wenyu's eyes widened in panic as Chao Tianya pulled him into his arms from behind and tugged open his inner garment. He struggled violently, pushing against Chao Tianya's arms as he resisted. "I don't want it. Let me go, Chao Songyue. Chao Tianya caught Yao Wenyu's hand in his own and guided it downward. Like this, one hand covering the other, they held Yao Wenyu's shame together. He gathered Yao Wenyu into his arms, and as he pressed his head into the crook of Yao Wenyu's neck, he heard Yao Wenyu crying. The last dim candle had gone out. They clung together in the dark, Yao Wenyu with his face hanging toward the rug, his cheeks wet with tears from the unbearable shame and indignation. A suppressed cry escaped his throat for the dignity he'd lost at Chao Tianya's hands, and for the clear look he'd gotten at himself. He drew in shuddering breaths between his sobs, his free hand gripping Chao Tianya's sleeve, as the pleasure of being defiled and shattered under the masterful slide of Chao Tianya's palm washed over him. "Kill me." A sob tore from Yao Wenyu as he rasped, "Chao Songyue, I hate you so much." Chao Tianya's hand glided up and down in the dark, his face pressed to the curve of Yuanzhua's jaw, listening to his sobs and curses, his gasps and his moans. "You're not wrong to have desires." As Yao Wenyu shivered, Chao Tianya whispered into his ear, earnest and hoarse, "So hate me all you want." Well, that went a little bit differently than I had expected. I guess they are toxic yaoi, huh? Yeah, I was gonna say, Chao Tianya, that's not the way to, express to someone that they're allowed to have desires. Yeah, you're kind of, well, so that chapter was, I guess, their ship name, be that as it may. And it's time to take a break now. So I guess we're gonna go process that. Yeah, I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Well, I'm back. I'm back, and I have kind of not fully processed that. Also, yeah, Psykeen, I agree of, like, that's definitely part of the reason why it's jarring if you compare them to the main relationship. And then there is also, like Blue said, the way that it started out seeming like it would be really sweet. So I just kind of feel like I did not see that coming. Especially with the, like, caretaker relationship. It was just like, no, I did not see that coming from anywhere. I should have known not to be so confident about, like, how wholesome they would be. Yeah, Blue, narratively speaking, they make a great contrast to Tsujo. Yeah. Unfortunately, that is true. So, and you know, what would you know? Who's on the cover of Volume 7? So, whatever is going on with them, I guess, is going to continue going on. So, meanwhile, we are on page 211 for chapter 204, which is called Empress Dowager. Henry, that's a good point, too. There's such good foils to Tsujo. Like, what happens when you have the pain in common, but you're still a little too close to the suffering to bond in a healthy way? Oh, like if Tsujo had happened before the 5-year time skip after the sinkhole. Like, there needed to be some distance from the trauma, and they don't have enough distance from the trauma. That's interesting. Yeah. That makes sense to me. Because, I mean, back then, Xiaoqie was, like, kicking Shen Zichuan almost to death, so... So, yeah, I wonder what's going on with the Empress Dowager. Xiaoqie was due to march on Duanzhou in the 2nd month. Shen Zichuan sent grain wagons ahead of the troops. In Duanzhou, Tan Daihu made the necessary arrangements. In the north, Xiao Jiming dispatched Wu Ziyu with 5,000 cavalrymen to stand by on the northern side of Mount Luo. If Xiaoqie encountered trouble, they could combine forces with 3rd Sand Camp and descend on Duanzhou together. Fine snow danced in the breeze this morning. The city outskirts stretched into the distance, and before them lay an empty, boundless horizon. Xiaoqie was clad from head to toe in heavy armor, which sank him right through the thin layer of snow on the ground. He looked like an iron wall standing before Shen Zichuan. That image is kind of cute. There are still bandits on Mount Luo, cloak draped over his shoulders. Shen Zichuan gazed up at Xiaoqie. Be careful when you pass through. Meng landed on Xiaoqia's shoulder. I will. This has to be a quick battle. I'll be back in the 3rd month at the latest. If the soldiers you send to Dongzhou aren't enough, let the marshal know. She can transfer men from Tianfei Watchtower. No problem there. Snow brushed past the hair at Chen Zichuan's temples and settled on his collar. Xiaoqia laid a hand on the crown of Shen Zichuan's head. A couplet inexplicably came to mind. For my wife is still in the springtime of life. Tender are the words I speak to comfort my beloved. Isn't that the one that his father would recite about his mother? Lanzhou was only 22 this year. He would be by Xiaoqia's side for decades to come. For Xiaoqia, who is destined to fight battles all over the realm with life and death always hanging in the balance, overthinking would merely serve to make him timid. Shen Zichuan was the reason Xiaoqia had become as hard as steel, yet he was also the source of Xiaoqia's softness. Xiaoqia wanted to protect this man until the very end of his life, and as such, he would give his best in every battle. But even men as strong as Xiao Fengshu might meet unpredictable ends. Xiaoqia had thought plenty after that incident. He loved this man, but he also worried for him. Perhaps others in the world didn't need Xiao Za'an that much, but Shen Lanzhou did. I'll be waiting for you here. Shen Zichuan raised his palm to caress Xiaoqia's cheek. In a soft voice, he said, Don't dally with anyone else along the way. Not even a glance. Xiaoqia surged forward and wrapped Shen Zichuan in an embrace. Standing amid the snow, huffing breaths of hot air, he felt as if he owed Lanzhou so much. Too much. The man couldn't even sleep without him. He nuzzled against Shen Zichuan's temple. Enthrone yourself in the Hall of Brilliance, he whispered, and let not the tempest touch you. Without waiting for Shen Zichuan to answer, Xiaoqia released him. He put on his helmet, mounted Snowcrest, and turned the horse's head to lead the Libe armored cavalry eastward. Seeing that Shen Zichuan didn't move, Fei Sheng raised the umbrella to shield him from the snow. Shen Zichuan stood in the fine drifts, clutching his blue handkerchief, until silence descended all around. Not Tong Jiuqing double-fisting death flags. Yeah. I mean, look, they're the main characters, so I feel generally okay about their survival, but I still don't like being reminded that they are in danger and fallible. Chudu had experienced several consecutive days of clear skies. One could even occasionally catch a glimpse of birds flitting between the double-eaved roofs of the Imperial Palace. The heir apparent was a fast learner. Although she still had no authority to make decisions, she had become accustomed to listening in on discussions of state affairs in Mingli Hall. She spoke rarely, yet behind those sharp eyes, Sen Yu saw her dedication to government affairs. Li Jianting had cultivated no other hobbies in the last 6 months, save studying and practicing calligraphy. She rose early each day and never rested even when she fell ill. The Chief Surveillance Bureau, which had lectured Li Jianheng heartily in the past, eventually could not find any points on which to admonish Li Jianting. In the eyes of these fastidious censors, she was the closest thing to a proper heir to the throne since the crown prince of the reign of Yongyi. Even Kong Qiu, initially critical of her presence, no longer spoke carelessly of her. They were like, well, we thought a girl couldn't do it, but she's proved us wrong in every possible way. Wait, Henry, 20 minutes ago, you almost said we haven't heard from her in a while. Perfect timing. No one knew how Xue Xiuzhuo had done it, but he had killed off the girl Ling Ting completely. Now there was only Li Jianting. I mean, I think she also did it herself, in part. But, I mean, it does make sense. But by putting her through, like, the amount of pressure that must be on her, and like, the just amount that she's expected to do. The Empress Dowager had lately been plagued by headaches. The incense usually lit in the hall aggravated them. She instructed Aunt Liu Xiang to sniff it out. The gray hairs at her temples had multiplied. At long last, old age was eroding this figure who had rested her hand on the scales of power in Chudu for 30 years. Faced with Li Jianting's fresh-faced youth, she felt increasingly willing in spirit, but lacking in strength. Yesterday, Han Cheng presented a memorial to the throne. He's still requesting that troops be deployed to Zizhou. The Hulian Marquis sat in the guest seat and groused. Conflicts abound, even among the people on our own side. Why is he still thinking of Zhongbo? The Empress Dowager let Aunt Liu Xiang massage her shoulders as she leaned back on the settee and looked over Han Cheng's memorial. Shen Zichuan has taken Fanzhou, and now he set his eyes on Duanzhou too. After spring, he will truly become the tiger of Zhongbo. He hates Han Cheng for the murder of his teacher. It's natural for Han Cheng to be afraid. The Hulian Marquis cared not a whit for Han Cheng's personal feuds. At present, he was anxious over something else. After the 9th month last year, the faction of pragmatists led by Xue Xiuzhuo had collaborated with the Chief Surveillance Bureau to audit the fields of the 8 cities in preparation for resurveying the farmlands. This was ostensibly no different from previous years, but in the past, such audits had merely been for show. The officials conducting the inspection tours simply went through the motions before submitting a pre-agreed-upon number to the Grand Secretariat, muddling their way through the process year after year. This time, it seemed Xue Xiuzhuo was serious. I warned you all long ago to tell your fiefs to restrain themselves, the Empress Dowager said. But did anyone listen? How many froze to death this last winter alone? Other than the 3 cities of Dicheng, Jincheng, and Chuancheng, which provided disaster relief for their people, everyone else was craven. She tossed the memorial onto the small table before her. The eastern pearls at her ears swayed. Why did Pan Lin have to antagonize Xue Xiuzhuo? Yes, Xue Xiuzhuo plans to work with Sen Yu and the others to investigate the fields. But was Pan Lin himself not the one who gave the opportunity? What's, Henry, you said if you like this type of character, check out TMA. I am blanking. What is TMA? The Hulian Marquis had married his daughter, Commandary Princess Zhao Yue, to Pan Lin's younger brother Pan Yi. The Fei and Pan clans were now in the same boat. They would sink or swim together. The Marquis had considered the marriage insurance against future trouble. Given that 3 members of the Pan clan, Pan Xiangjie, Pan Lin, and Pan Yi, were all high officials of the imperial court. He simply hadn't expected Pan Lin to be such a pain in the ass. The Hulian Marquis didn't dare step in directly to defend Pan Lin and risk sharing the blame. But he couldn't let his son-in-law's brother fall from grace like this either. Pan Lin was currently unofficially filling the position of Minister of Revenue. The job he did was crucial, yet he didn't have the official title in hand. Everyone was fraught with anxiety. If Pan Lin was defeated in this tussle, they would be handing the officials of humble origins the Ministry of Revenue on a silver platter. Chengzhi is impatient by nature. I've no idea how he offended Xue Xiuzhuo. The Marquis was like an ant on a hot pan, burning with anxiety. He pleaded, but Pan Xiangjie and Pan Yi are both loyal to your majesty, and you watched our Zhao Yue grow up into a lady. She and the third lady are... The gall of you. The Empress Dowager cut him off, sitting up to better berate him. How dare you drag the third lady into these political disputes? When I wanted Zhao Yue to marry that boy from the Han clan, you refused. You insisted on coveting that scrap of advantage the Pan clan offered you. Now that things have gone south, don't expect me to come rescue you. The Empress Dowager was rarely so angry. The palace maids and eunuchs inside and outside the hall dropped to their knees and prostrated themselves on the ground, holding their breath. Even the Hulian Marquis dared not remain seated. He sank to his knees, frantically shuffled forward on the ground, and slapped himself several times on the face. "Your Majesty, please be appeased." "The third lady has been married off to Qidong," the Empress Dowager declared solemnly. "She is Qi Shiyu's lady of the house, his official wife. She has a proper rank now. Every word she says and action she takes is under scrutiny. Your thief's encroachment on the commoners' fields has nothing to do with her. I don't want to hear of this again. At your age, do you still need me to teach you when to hold your tongue?" Oh, it's the Magnus Archives. I have heard a lot about that. I've heard it's good. Although I don't really know anything about what it's about. But, definitely interested in checking that out at some point. Yes, of course, of course. The Hulian Marquis was not a courageous man. The only lawful descendants of the Fey clan in this generation were the young Marquis, Feisha, and Commandery Princess Zhao Yue. Feisha spent his days fooling around. Even now, he held no proper official position. Because of this, the Hulian Marquis had hesitated over Zhao Yue's marriage for a long time, worrying over every little thing. How could he have guessed that, after all his precautions, trouble would still come knocking? The Empress Dowager rose to her feet. Holding an arm out for Aunt Liu Xiang to support her, she made her way to the Hulian Marquis. The Marquis was getting on in years, and all else aside, he was a noble. It was a disgrace for him to keep kneeling like this. The Empress Dowager recovered her calm a little more with each step, and finally said, "Get up. This is unbecoming." The Hulian Marquis scrambled to his feet and stood helplessly by the Empress Dowager's side, not daring to come too close. The Empress Dowager looked up along the palace eaves at the bright and clear sky. After a moment of thought, she said, "Feisha, too, has come of age. If his inclinations do not run to scholarship, he can take the military route. There are many vacancies in the 8th grade battalions. Let him go there and learn. He doesn't need to carve out a distinguished career. As long as he can temper himself, it will be well worth it. Once he puts in the hours and has a record of service under his belt, he will naturally be promoted into the Ministry of War." With this, the Empress Dowager had prodded the Marquis's sore spot. Feisha was his only son, and he had kept the boy sheltered in the inner manor as a child. Since Feisha had entered society, he had shown himself adept at all things related to the drinking of wine and the soliciting of courtesans. At anything at all, except learning. What's more, he was an obstinate man, and close friends with Pan Lin. To date, he was unwilling to show Xue Xiuzhua due respect, instead spending all his days wallowing in vice on Donglong Street. The only one with any power over him was his older sister. The Hulian Marquis's eyes grew moist, and he lifted his sleeves to wipe his tears. "Your Majesty is the compassionate mother of all under the sky. Your graciousness knows no bounds. This humble subject hoped for him to join the 8th grade battalions as well, but with that temperament of his..." He sighed. The Empress Dowager had lost all patience with the Hulian Marquis. She knew what he meant. The 8th grade battalions were no longer the glamorous, lucrative posts of past years, when the most they had to manage was Chudu's patrols. Given the situation in Zhongbo, chances were good they'd be deployed to fight in the near future. The Hulian Marquis feared Feisha would come to harm on the battlefield. He was reluctant to send his only son to give his life for this cause. He had come here hoping the Empress Dowager could get Feisha into the 6 ministries instead. But Chudu was no longer the playground of the noble clans. Domestic strife was everywhere, and foreign threats were imminent. Chudu had failed to eliminate Shen Zichuan when it had the chance, and he had become the overlord of Zhongbo in 6 short months, even allying with Li Bei in the north. If not for the pressing threat of the Bianshao horsemen, he would be knocking on Chudu's door by now. In the southeast, Shi Juyin was sending letters requesting permission to deploy her troops against the Qingshu tribe in the 4th month. And here at home, Xue Shoujuo was pressing in on them with every step. Although he appeared to be in a private feud with Pan Lin, every one of his impeachment memorials contained legitimate claims backed by solid evidence. The 8 cities were indeed encroaching on the commoners' fields, and it would be an uphill battle once the Chief Surveillance Bureau's investigations started in the spring. Yet even at this stage, the Hylian Marquis and those like him were only thinking of themselves and those small patches of land that made up their fiefs, fearing they would be confiscated. During the reign of Xiande, from Hua Siqian to Wei Huaigu, they were never in want of capable ministers or generals. Yet who did they have now? The Hylian Marquis was a bungling oaf, good for nothing. Pan Xiangjie was a fence-sitter who turned wherever the wind blew. And Han Chung was a rapacious braggart with ambitions of grandeur. Dealing with the Grand Secretariat exhausted the Empress Dowager both physically and mentally. Xue Shoujuo's investigation of the 8 cities' farmlands is meant to pave the way for the heir apparent's ascension. The look in the Empress Dowager's eyes was unfathomable. It is not yet time for the heir apparent to step forward. Go back and make it clear to Pan Xiangjie that he needs to open the granaries in Dancheng and Chuancheng and distribute the grain as aid relief until the day the last snow melts. And tell him to clean up his accounts. Return those unnecessary fields to the people. Xue Shoujuo does not have the power to do as he pleases just yet. If he wants to investigate, let him. If those accounts fall into his hands, how can we exculpate ourselves? The Hylian Marquis asked in alarm. The Empress Dowager looked at him. Pan Lin has served in the Ministry of Revenue a long time, and his yearly reviews are always good. He has capable men working under him as well. Xue Shoujuo wants to work with the Chief Surveillance Bureau, but even so, he can't sidestep the Ministry of Revenue. The previous year's field records are all there, and they also manage the auditing of the account books. Pan Lin can still dodge the accusations. Tell him to appoint someone he trusts to handle the case. Weather this, and Xue Shoujuo will find it difficult to force the issue. The Hylian Marquis pondered this. There's a man under him named Liang Cuishan. Pan Lin's given him guidance before. The Tian Chen Emperor promoted him after the incident with the public ditches. This man's review last year was outstanding, and he has a good reputation with the officials of humble origins. He's from Chudu, and his background isn't particularly noteworthy. He's a convenient pawn. As long as the Pan clan can survive the worst of this, the Empress Dowager said, things can only improve. Oh. Blue, you said, oh wait, wasn't this our guy? Was Liang Cuishan our guy? Once again, I'm just not keeping up with all the names. But that kind of rings a bell. The appropriation of farmland had occurred in all the 8 cities. How clean could the Xue clan's Chuancheng be? In investigating the 8 cities' fields, Xue Shoujuo was directly threatening the noble clan's interests. It was an audacious move. If the field taxes were subject to serious scrutiny, no doubt heads would roll. The Empress Dowager was suggesting that Pan Lin use Liang Cuishan to choke off the investigation of the fields in Dancheng. If the investigation stalled and the bookkeeping was sloppy, the Pan clan could turn the tables and attack Xue Shoujuo in the imperial court. Perhaps they could even suggest the Chief Surveillance Bureau investigate his Xue clan's Chuancheng first. Okay, so this is interesting because if that's their guy, it wouldn't necessarily be unwanted for him to attack Xue Shoujuo, but they just don't want him working for the Empress Dowager. But, like, they're not really on either side of this particular battle. Bathed in the shifting glow of the setting sun, the Empress Dowager slid the well-worn Buddhist prayer beads off her wrist and tossed them onto the settee. With the incense smoke from the prayer hall rising in spirals behind her, she was the very image of dignity and poise. Her bearing would have belied her old age, had it not been for the gray hair at her temples. I think it's interesting whenever they talk about her, the Buddhist prayer beads, and how she said, like, she's a Buddhist. In other words, she's, a pacifist, which I don't believe is actually true. So it's interesting that in this moment she took the beads off. And that's the end of the chapter. So we have one more chapter today. On page 221, we are on chapter 205, Duanzhou. It was not until the second month that Shi Juyin received a reply from Chudu. Right, Blue, she's a pacifist in the same way that politicians claim to be good Christians. Exactly. She read it from top to bottom in their manner in Songjun commentary, then said to her father, who was lying in bed, I requested to move on the Qingshu tribe, but the Ministry of War didn't approve. The Empress Dowager wants me to wait. She's concerned about military expenses. But Zhongbo is already marching to war. I'll miss the golden opportunity if I wait any longer. Qi Shiyu is in better health these days. He clutched a handkerchief as he spoke, stuttering, hurry. Setting the letter down, Qi Juyin deliberately distorted his meaning and said, That's right. I'm in a hurry. How could I not be? If Li Bei's troops are defeated, it won't benefit Qidong in any way. At last, Qi Shiyu produced a complete sentence. What's your hurry? Qi Juyin leaned back in her chair. She could hear one of her father's concubines wailing and making a fuss in the courtyard. Qi Juyin had ridden half the night to get here, and had already drunk several cups of strong tea to keep herself awake. Furthermore, she still had to ride back later. These sobs were getting on her last nerve. She said to Qi Shiyu, Can't you tell her to shut up? The concubine in the courtyard had given Qi Shiyu a son. Now she was the picture of a tear-stained beauty as she leaned on her maidservant and sobbed loudly in the direction of the room. My lord, can't you even let me see my lord? Oh, Marshal, how heartless of you. Shi Wei stood still under the eaves, watching the woman cry until her eyes were red and swollen, and she was almost sliding to the ground. He clicked his tongue and shuffled around to face the wall. Listening to her was giving him a headache. Qi Shiyu could tell which concubine this was from her wails alone. Before his stroke, he was most tender toward the fairer sex, but now he clenched his handkerchief, chest heaving as he shouted with all his might, Shut up, you hear me? He paused to catch his breath and covered the corner of his mouth with the handkerchief. To Qi Juyin, he said, Li Bei has no... That was years ago, Qi Juyin answered. At your age, you are still holding a grudge against the old prince? He's gone. And the commanding generals on Li Bei's front are quite an interesting bunch. They're not what they were a dozen years ago. Then Xiao Jiming and Xiao Qie. Speaking was a strain on Qi Shiyu. Even he frowned, hearing himself. He pushed out the words. Can beat Amur? If you deploy troops to clean up their mess, the Empress Dowager will view you with suspicion. Once the battle is over, see how Chudu takes you to task. Several decades ago now, Qi Shiyu had been the Prince Charming of a great many of Zhou's ladies. He came from a distinguished background, and he was handsome to boot. Among the 4 great generals of the reign of Yongyi, he was the first to make his name in Qidong. Feng Yisheng, yet to distinguish himself, had been a high-ranking officer until under his command. Qi Shiyu had stood a chance at being conferred the title of a prince, but Xiao Fengshu's meteoric rise at Luoxia Pass had overshadowed his achievements. I also believe that either Third Lady Hua or Qi Juyin poisoned him. Certainly seems like it to me. The Li Bei armored cavalry overtook the Qidong garrison troops in honor and glory, trampling Qi Shiyu's life's ambitions. There was no real enmity between them, only rivalry, although they'd once gotten into a physical fight in Chudu long ago. Qi Shiyu had sneered at Xiao Fengshu's humble origins, and Xiao Fengshu had called Qi Shiyu a pretty face with no substance. When Feng Yisheng was still around, he was the oldest among them, and it was due to his relentless efforts, along with Liu Pingyan's, that Qidong and Li Bei had been brothers for so many years. Qi Shiyu never accepted defeat, but unfortunately, he had no son and heir of lawful birth. He'd briefly entertained the idea of marrying Qi Juyin to Xiao Jiming, but he couldn't get past the rift between their families and never did broach the topic with Xiao Fengshu. You think Chudu will take me to task? Qi Juyin removed her blade and set it aside. If Li Bei is gone, so is Zhang Bo. And if Zhang Bo is gone, Dang Cheng is next. Who will the Empress Dowager take to task for that? Herself? For all their shortcomings, Xiao Jiming and Xiao Qia are both the old prince's sons. Does Chudu expect to stop the Bianshao horsemen with Han Cheng? We might as well perish with the empire. Rendered speechless, Qi Shiyu wheezed for breath. Qi Juyin poured a cup of tea and continued, "You'd better rest for a while." "No." Qi Shiyu's natural obstinance took over as he childishly tossed his handkerchief at Qi Juyin. "Foolish girl. Bargain with the Empress Dowager. You should at least have a noble title to your name before you go to war." Qi Juyin fell silent. She knew this was Qi Shiyu's way of showing care for her. She had served as the Grand Marshal of Qidong's 5 commanderies for years, yet still held no noble rank. If she were injured or incapacitated, it would take merely one order from Chudu to remove her from the post. At the very least, you'd have a title in life and, Qi Shiyu's voice faltered, status in death. It was true. Without a title, once she passed, Qi Juyin would be no more than a nameless daughter of the Qi clan. No matter how illustrious her military career, she couldn't leave her rightful name and title behind for posterity. Qi Juyin studied the pattern on her teacup. A soldier knows only to die in the battlefield for their country. Why should they concern themselves with the return of their body home after? There's a footnote. Oh my god, y'all. No way. This is the first footnote of the entire volume, and we're halfway through. I was like, 1? It's the number 1? Like, are you joking? I could have sworn there was something before this, but nope. This is the final lines from the poem Beyond the Frontier by Xu Xilin, a Chinese revolutionary born near the end of the Qing dynasty. If I die in battle, carve my name on a memorial tablet at home. It's all the same. She raised her head and smiled at Qi Shiyu. Our Qidong is under their control. Every move we make must be discussed with Chudu. As long as the Empress Dowager agrees to the provisions, I can do without the title. It is what it is. Perhaps old age had finally caught up with Qi Shiyu. He suddenly began to weep. He swatted away Qi Juyin's hand when she tried to wipe his tears for him, hanging his head as he choked with sobs. If only you were a boy. Qi Juyin folded the handkerchief and set it beside the bed. She waited for Qi Shiyu to regain his composure, then continued. Many of our brothers have died in battle. Can each and every one of them leave behind a legacy? General Feng wasn't conferred a title either, was he? I'm telling you this so you know how things stand. We really are going to war this year. A few months ago, I heard Chen Zhen, the Minister of War, was ill. His poor health is part of the reason the Ministry of War didn't approve my request to mobilize troops. Once he steps down, we'll have no one left on our side in Chudu. It'll be even harder to ask for money and provisions then. We should save as much as we can at home. Stop letting yourself be swayed by pillow talk. Those concubines of yours all have fiefs and shops to their names. Even if I die, they and your sons won't starve to death. Qi Chi Shiyu huffed. All the properties I gave you were used to make up for the shortfall in military spending. After a moment of thought, Chi Juyin comforted him with, I did keep a small plot of land. My mother used to plant flowers and herbs there. I couldn't bear to sell it. It's enough for me to make a living off of. The concubine outside had gone quiet. The afternoon was overcast. Thick clouds covered the sky, and the interior of the room, shrouded by drapes, was even dimmer. Chi Shiyu gazed at his daughter from his sickbed. The weak light from the window silhouetted her slim shoulders and caught on his late wife's hairpin adorning her hair. Chi Juyin resembled her mother. When her features weren't dominated by her imposing aura, when she was smiling, she had a distinctly feminine charm. The marshal was not as stonily handsome as the rumors made out. I will say, not that I disagree with this at all, but I feel like Suto draws her more like how the rumors would describe her from the drawings that we've seen of her. She waited until Chi Shiyu fell asleep before she left. After changing her shoes on the veranda, she stepped out into the snow in her deerskin boots. Not to say that I'm complaining at all. Where'd she go? She asked Chiwei. The mistress called her away, Chiwei answered, keeping pace with her as he walked. Chi Juyin hadn't seen Hua Xiangyi since her return, and now she hesitated for a moment. As she passed Hua Xiangyi's courtyard, she heard sweet voices, like the delicate calls of orioles and sparrows, from within. From where she stood on the far side of the arching moon gate, she glimpsed Hua Xiangyi between the gaps of plum blossom branches. Oh, hello, art. Speaking of art. Oh, I do, Henry, I do like that she looks like her mother. It's not just like, oh, the strong woman looks like her father. Exactly. No, I agree with you. Oh, but Blue, she does look very butch, but I guess this is saying she looks a lot more pretty than handsome when she's smiling. No, that makes sense. From where she stood... Oh, wait. I think I read that already. Hold on. Yes. From where she stood on the far side of the arching moon gate, she glimpsed Hua Xiangyi between the gaps of plum blossom branches. The lady of the house was bundled up in a fox fur coat today. Judging by the quality of the material, she had likely brought it from Chudu. It was a pure, unadulterated white, and the thick, fine fur framing her cheeks complemented her eyes, clear as the autumn waters, so that they appeared even brighter. She had the look of a girl who'd grown up pampered, wanting for nothing. The fingertips she rested on the plum blossom branch before her were fair and dainty, as if they had never been tarnished with a speck of dust in her life. For reasons she didn't understand, Chi Juyin stood, head turned, and watched for a long time. I know, the plum blossom theme in this novel. Okay, we're gonna look at the art now. How beautiful. I cannot deal with the art in these books. Our bookkeeper is already prepared to the account books and is waiting for you in the office. The household expenditure last year. Having spoken to this point, Chiwei looked up to see that Chi Juyin had not stirred from her spot. He followed her gaze. Chi Juyin raised Banisher and blocked his view. On the other side of the gate, Hua Xiangyi plucked the plum branch. A painted blossom adorned the space between her brows. She laughed at something her maidservant whispered in her ear, then turned and glided out of sight. Head still turned, Chi Juyin said, "Let's go." "Let's go?" Chiwei echoed, baffled. Chi Juyin strode ahead. Chiwei, yet to make heads or tails of the marshal's behavior and not daring to ask, followed. Chi Juyin headed straight to the office to reconcile the books with the bookkeeper. There was no time to sit. She simply stood at the desk and flipped through the pages. "Do we have a new steward?" Chi Juyin suddenly asked. Blue, she's so mesmerized by lesbian feelings that she sees that she's gliding instead of walking. She sees her gliding. Wait, yeah. It's just like that sometimes. The bookkeeper hunched over and answered in a small voice. No, Marshal. Strange. Julian flipped a few more pages. These accounts have always been a mess. Our records couldn't be vaguer if they tried. Why are last year's accounts so neat? I wonder. The accounts were more than just neat. This year's advances had been written out in a separate book, the expenses of the various branches of the family listed out precisely. Her father's concubine's cosmetic spending had been halved again on top of the restriction Qi Juyan had placed on them, and even the properties Qi Shiyu himself couldn't make sense of had been accounted for. These pages were more beautifully laid out than those from the Ministry of Revenue. The Marshal is correct. Before, our household accounts were a convoluted mess. The ladies were unable to give detailed accounts of their spending, and our clerks were at a loss for where to start. The bookkeeper offered Qi Juyan a teacup with both hands. You previously asked everyone to tighten their belts, but we couldn't get a clear figure on the earnings from our rural properties, and the monthly tributes were a mess because they were mixed in with our logistical expenses. Qi Juyan raised her eyes to the bookkeeper. The mistress was the one who tallied the accounts this time. Afraid of incurring Qi Juyan's displeasure, he hurriedly added, she manages the inner courtyards and the domestic affairs, so she looks through the accounts of all the ladies. She specifically sent someone to tell us the records were too messy, and that we must redo them for the sake of your upcoming military budgets. We tried to reconcile them a few times, but the outcry from the ladies was too much. Many of them were concealing the income from their properties and refusing to come clean. Henry, you've read enough household politics, Danmei, to know the account book's looking too good as suspicious. That's true. She wasn't surprised. Her father's concubines were all afraid he would kick the bucket, so they kept a tight hold on the rural properties and shops under their names. As if that wasn't enough, they'd been fishing for more and more from the main house and refusing to speak the truth when it was time to settle accounts. Qi Juyan didn't live at home in the inner courtyard, and her trusted subordinates like Qi Wei were not immediate family, and men to boot. It was inappropriate for them to intervene. These accounts gave her a headache every time she thought of them. It seems this third Lady Hua is rather capable. Qi Juyan took the account book, and the ladies all fell in line, just like that. At first, they pulled long faces and gave her a hard time, the bookkeeper said. They've all given birth to young masters, so they were counting on my lord's affections. Not only did they refuse to hand over their ledgers, they even went to my lord's courtyard to kick up a ruckus when we asked. It was the marshal who sent Miss Hongying to serve the mistress, wasn't it? The mistress had Miss Hongying bring the ladies who'd fainted from sobbing too hard back to her own courtyard, and called for a physician to examine them. The physician couldn't find anything wrong with them, so the mistress had them all buried right there in the courtyard. It took a while for Qi Juyan to make sense of this statement. Buried in the courtyard? Buried up to their necks, the bookkeeper said. It was wonderful. The ladies cried themselves hoarse and said they were going to lodge a complaint with the marshal. Huh? With me? So she gave them horses, opened up the gates, and told them to go. This is amazing. This is incredible. These concubines all required a fleet of servants just to get dressed. Not one of them knew how to ride horse. Qi Shiyu had no interest in women like that. Despite the harsh winter weather, Hua Xiangyi buried anyone caught wailing at Qi Shiyu's door neck deep in her own courtyard like she was planting radishes. In no time, the concubines fainted in earnest from the freezing cold. The matrons by Hua Xiangyi's side were all old hands, the Empress Dowager had personally selected. They had plenty of tricks up their sleeves. Whenever the concubines dared make a scene, they taught the women a hard lesson. The concubines knelt along the walkway and waited to speak to the mistress, but they never caught so much as a glimpse of Hua Xiangyi's face. When the concubines gave up and returned to their own courtyards in tears, their sons took up the cause. "Oh, it's the young masters," Hua Xiangyi had said gently from behind the screen. "A few days ago, someone came to our door to hound us for the several hundred taels of silver you owe them. Well, that simply wouldn't do. As the lady of the house, I felt sorry for you all, so I asked the aunties here with me to make up the payment. Don't worry. All the debt slips have handprints and signatures on them. I've got them tucked away for safekeeping in case the creditors claim they never received the payment and come looking for my lord. Boys, are you leaving so soon?" And that was how it went. The bookkeeper finished with relish. The mistress holds the young master's debts in her hands. She only has to file the debt slips with us, and the young master's shops will all be transferred to her as collateral. How would they still dare make trouble now? QJJ closed the account book, stood for a moment, then opened it again. Quite the temper she has. This account book had indeed been tidied up beautifully. QJJ couldn't help but wonder if Qidong's military accounts were this well presented. Would she need to fear those wildly old foxes from the Ministry of Revenue? But Hua Xiangyi was, after all, the Empress Dowager's pride and joy. After thinking about it a minute longer, she dropped the idea. And there's a scene break. This is just what it's like to have feelings for a woman, by the way. Hold on, everyone breathe. I saw the name Yao Wen Yu. I didn't think we were going to go back to whatever's going on there. Okay. The snow subsided in the second month, and sunny days in Suzhou became more frequent. Whenever Shen Zichuan had free time, he brought Yao Wen Yu to the outskirts of the city for a stroll. It was cloudless for miles around, the sky a bright, clear azure blue. The snow blanketing the forest had begun to melt, and thawing stream water made gentle music over the rocks. There were new signs of wildlife in the woods. Ding Tao had been tasked with letting Frostfall out to pasture, so he brought Li Xiong along to play at the edge of the forest. "You haven't looked well these last few days." Shen Zichuan wiped his fingers clean with a handful of snow and cast a glance at Yao and Yu. "Are you not sleeping at night?" Nothing escapes Shen Zichuan. Yao and Yu's pale profile was reflected in the frosty leaves. He smiled. "It's cold, and my legs are hurting, that's all." He paused. "It has been half a month since Arya arrived in Duanzhou. Has your lordship received any news?" Tantai Hu discovered some pockets of bandits wandering the area around Mount Luo. Ta'an was delayed there for a few days. They reported the night before last that they cleared out the bandits, and the Libe armored cavalry has occupied Mount Luo. Today, Shen Zichuan was wearing a narrow-sleeved robe in a pale jade, with a long velvet coat that made him look especially youthful. A dog-hide arm guard was wrapped around his right arm. He whistled as he raised it, and Meng came spiraling down from the treetops to land. Meng was too heavy. Shen Zichuan could only let him perch for a moment. The tireless messenger bird had been traveling to and fro, so Shen Zichuan fed him some unseasoned meat before letting him fly off to play. Mount Luo was never going to give us much trouble. Yeah, when you watched Meng fly away. The difficulty lies with Duanzhou. Duanzhou's long border ran right along the Chasha River, and the prefecture had been completely infiltrated by the Biansha horsemen in the past few years. No one knew how many scorpions lurked within. Xiaoqia had only taken 5,000 soldiers of the Imperial Army with him. The rest of the troops were made up of the Libe armored cavalry. unwilling to give up the heavy armor of Li Bei completely. He hoped to find a way to use it against the scorpions in Duanzhou. And Duanzhou was where Shen Zichuan's heart hung. Noting Shen Zichuan's grave expression, Yao Wenyu said soothingly, "Now that the relay stations are connected and running smoothly again, we can send reinforcements immediately if there's any change in the situation. Besides, Arya is a man blessed by heaven." Lu Guangbai said a Moor is planting crops on the other side of the Chasha River. Shen Zichuan pushed aside a withered branch near his head as he walked. "My concern is that he has long been wary of Zhongbo, and his placement of the fields near Gadal signals his preparation to fight a protracted war in Duanzhou." Li Bei could not afford any delay. If they couldn't capture Duanzhou now, Third Sand Camp's position would become even more precarious, and Zhongbo would be unable to completely shut down their gates. Would be able to completely shut their gates. Amor had set his sights so broadly that Shen Zichuan had a feeling he'd considered everything from north to south. He couldn't help thinking back to last year's battles, when Amor sent Hu Helu to hold down Guo Weili specifically to give Hasin time to head north. At the time, the Scorpions' infiltration of Zhongbo and their smuggling of supplies had all been to prepare for the attack on Li Bei's camps. Now that Hasan had taken Xiao Fengshu out of the equation and reduced the pressure on the northern battlefields, Amor would have more energy to confront Qi Juyin. He would rely on the Scorpions to hold Li Bei in check, then send his cavalry to keep Qi Juyin locked down in Qidong, leaving Zhongbo the vulnerable underbelly of the empire. As soon as he could get a hand free, he would bring it down on the battlefront that had only just stabilized. The battle in Duanzhou would be a tough one. Yao Wenyu was about to say more when Fei Sheng rode up. He dismounted and bowed to Shen Zichuan. "Master, Yan Heru is here." Oh, this guy again. Chudu had just finished auditing Hezhou's transportation of the government's grain levies, so presumably Yan Heru had come to whine about it. Moreover, they had yet to come to an agreement regarding the new port in Jueshi. Shen Zichuan turned. "Let's head back." Oh, outfit check on Yan Heru. I do wonder what he's wearing today. Yan Heru had indeed come to whine. He'd arrived too late to catch Shen Zichuan, and Zhou Gui and the others sat with him briefly to discuss some of the logistics of the new port in Liuzhou. By the time Shen Zichuan returned, he'd vented most of his grievances, and was able to tell him about the inspection of the grain levy shipments in Hezhou with relative coherence. The Ministry of Revenue sent a guy called Liang Tuishan to oversee the grain levy in Hezhou. He led the collection of salt taxes in Jueshi, too. Last year, he and Jiang Qingshan whipped all 13 cities into shape. It's thanks to these two our business has been tough. Yan Heru shifted in the hard chair, then continued brightly. "I'm telling you, your lordship, they had me real worried there. This guy's not easy to deal with. He isn't the sort who knows how to take a bribe. But you'll never guess what happened. Before I could even think of a plan to deal with him, he was transferred away. They said he was sent off to the Court of Judicial Review to investigate the fields in Dancheng. For once, the Imperial Court has done me a favor." Liang Cuishan? Shen Zichuan found the name familiar. Liang Cuishan, courtesy name Chongshen. Yan Heru slumped over the table and winked up at Shen Zichuan. "You know him? You should have said so sooner. Then I wouldn't have had to worry so much." Of course, Shen Zichuan knew him. He himself had told Xiao Qie to recommend Liang Cuishan for promotion after the public ditches incident. That's how he knew him. They transferred him to Dancheng to investigate the fields. That's right. Pan Lin is duking it out with Xue Xiuzhuo in court right now. Xue Xiuzhuo has balls of steel to be poking at the hornet's nest like that. Yan Heru said dramatically, pausing for effect. "Your lordship, can you even guess how much farmland the 8 cities have stolen from the commoners over the years? If Xue Xiuzhuo actually gets to the bottom of those accounts, Even the Empress Dowager could be taken to task. Imagine what will happen to the Pan clan. All the noble clans want Xue Xiuzhuo dead. The noble clan's appropriation of commoners' fields had led to a surge of displaced migrants. Many of those who had flocked to Zhongbo last year were commoners forced to leave their homes for this reason. Shi Huilian had implemented the Yellow Register as a way to curb the problem. But even this had proved ineffective within the 8 cities. Now, Xue Xiuzhuo was using Yao Wenyu's narrow escape as an excuse to deal the first blow to the Pan clan of Dancheng. Even Yao Wenyu had to concede that Xue Xiuzhuo had guts. Pan Lin promoted Liang Cuishan. Shen Zichuan understood in a flash. The noble clans want Liang Cuishan to use his authority in the Ministry of Revenue to obstruct Xue Xiuzhuo's investigation. They're likely hoping to drag things out until spring. What a fine little pissing contest. Let them fight to the death, then. Yan Haru clapped his hands lightly and grinned at Shen Zichuan. Best if they keep fighting until Zhongbo gains a foothold, no? By then, your lordship will be ready to teach them a lesson. I fear you'll be disappointed. Raising his fan, Shen Zichuan pushed away Yan Haru's fingers that had made their way too close across the table. This Liang Cuishan. Voices rang out under the eaves. Shen Zichuan fell silent as the gentlemen in the room all looked over. Zhou Gui rose from his seat. What is this clamor? A discussion is underway in the hall. A pale-faced Fei Sheng lifted the hanging screen, his gaze skimming past the others and landing on Shen Zichuan. Master. A gust of wind escaped the dark vault of heaven and funneled through the open doorway. With such force, all the gentlemen raised their sleeves to shield their faces. Shen Zichuan was already on his feet. He could see in Fei Sheng's eyes that something was wrong. He took a few steps forward and stared at Fei Sheng under the flickering candlelight, as if to confirm his guess. An urgent report from the front line, Fei Sheng said in a grim voice. It's Arya. What you said, Blue. Exactly. This is an evil cliffhanger, because we're not coming back to this until Monday. I'm so sorry, everyone. I was really thinking we were going to get away without a cliffhanger this time, and literally at the last minute, we get into this. Literally, we were just having a conversation with Yan Haru being dramatic, and we get to this. Well. So, when we come back, I mean, yeah, it's T97. It's her fault. When we come back, we will be on chapter 206, which is called Frozen River. That sounds great. That sounds awesome. Cool. Henry, are you referencing something? Oh no, you're sick. I'm sorry to hear that. Wait, when was that? Wait, I've forgotten the arm thing. Oh, wait, did he think... Oh no, I remember now. There was like a... They made Shen Zichuan think that Xiaojia had lost his arm. Yes. Okay. I forget what book that happened. Oh no, they told him... Oh, it was Lanzhou. Okay. Oh, that's right. It was Xiaojia, I think, yeah. Well, I'd like to think this is that kind of situation. I don't know. I don't like that. Especially in conjunction with, like, the cover of the book and everything. Well, the cover of the book is more beginning of the book stuff. But when I first saw the cover of the book, I did think that in this volume, Xiaojia was going to be in, like, some sort of military predicament at some point and, like, isolated, basically. So I'm still getting that vibe. Right, it's not gonna be that. Because she wouldn't know. I said I hoped it would be that, but it's obviously not gonna be that, because she's not gonna pull the same thing twice. Absolutely. That's right. Shenzi Chuan has been getting injured too often. We need to flip the dynamic and have him taking care of Xiaoqie. That's true, though. Blue, the covers for QJJ are a lot more deceptive compared to the average 7Cs cover. Yes. They're like... They kind of make you think something, but you might be wrong. You might be wrong about it. Well, yeah, I am so sorry that is where we had to stop. But I will see you back on Monday. Thank you for coming to the stream, everybody. This was certainly a stream of all time. Have a good one.